Hello, my fellow Koreans abroad. This is almost 11 o'clock in South Korea, midnight, and I heard many times that many Korean Americans or Korean English, Korean Australians who are living abroad want to understand the Korean politics exactly because they think that the Korean Peninsula questions is not in such a good shape because leftist regime in South Korea is creating a very unfavorable condition to improve Korean democracy and also to create more advanced level of Korean politics in the future. So today, as a first topic, let me try to talk about the recent, North Korea's positive response to the South Korean President Moon Jae-in's, United Nations General Assembly speech to seek the declaration of the end of the Korean War in the future. So I think, this question has been discussed, several times in the past, depending on the political climate in the South Korean politics. Sometimes, leftist regimes utilized this issue to prove that they are seeking inter-Korean peace instead of, promoting hostility policy toward North Korea. But actually, the dual standard, the true meaning of this kind of topic is not such a desirable one for a whole Korean politics and the future of inter-Korean ties. So let me briefly analyze a certain aspect of the question this time. The sister of North Korean leader Kim Yo-jong positively responded by saying that North Korea is ready to even have inter-Korean summit but there are some conditions. If formal declaration ending the Korean War could be accepted, with the certain conditions that the United States and South Korea abandoned the hostility policies to North Korea. And also, she expressed the intention to restore an inter-Korean liaison office the North Korea destroyed last year, and possibly she suggested that if South Korea and the United States stop the allied military exercises, something like that. But as you know, we are approaching the presidential election next year, March 9th. It is understandable that North Korea is trying to seek alliance with the leftist regime in South Korea and possibly to extend one more term of the leftist government, thus, creating a good condition to help North Korea in helping humanitarian aid, also as she requested, abandoning certain sanctions, imposed by the United Nations and also the presidential order of the United States. But as we understand, the State Department of the United States only expressed a basic conditions that the United States is open to any kind of dialogue, but also United States is sticking to a basic principle that the North Korean nuclear weapons must be denuclearized. It means that North Korea should show a certain willingness, to truly seek to reduce or to eliminate its nuclear weapons. Also, possibly including the weapons of mass destruction, something like that. As you understand, at the 8th plenary session of the North Korea's ruling Workers' Party, North Korea described a broad array of objections to current South Korean and U.S. policy, including not only joint allied exercises and new weapons being introduced by the South. As we all understand, South Korea recently succeeded in developing SLBM, submarine-launched ballistic missile, for the first time in South Korean military history, and this is a seventh success of development of SLBM in the world military weapons history. Also, North Korea is wanting to reduce sanctions, by the international society, and also they want, to stop talking about the worsening human rights situation in North Korea, and also possibly even Kim Yo-jong is mentioning the ending of the stationing of U.S. forces on the Korean Peninsula. But as we all understand, Kim Yo-jong's remarks only makes a symbolic meaning in terms of the fact that in the past North Korea reiterated such kind of political slogans, but when actually certain agreement reached, it proved that North Korea is not sincere and they have not kept certain kind of agreement made with the international community, also sometimes with South Korea, and especially regarding denuclearization of the North Korean nuclear weapons. They have not kept their word made with the United States and the international community. Sometimes with unreasonable reasons they suggested. So international community is closely monitoring North Korea's attitude regarding this kind of issues. Why then leftist regime in South Korea, President Moon Jae-in, is trying to raise this kind of peaceful approaches, which is not actually realistic in terms of its North Korea's past behaviors. This is a very serious question. And the Blue House in South Korea is also responding with a signal to Kim Yo-jong, North Korea's Kim Jong-un leader sister's positive response to President Moon Jae-in's declaration of the end of the Korean War intention, something like that. But as you all understand, both leftist regime in South Korea and North Korea is targeting the next year's Beijing Olympic Games, for they want to have a certain kind of inter-Korean summit. If Chinese Communist Party is to cooperate with the United States to make the summit possible, which South Korean President Moon Jae-in has been trying in the last 4.5 years. In terms of South Korea's leftist regime's wish that their next year's presidential election will be very important, and also they could be gaining South Koreans' support in voting calculation by creating a kind of reconciliatory approach with North Korea. But actually, what is more important is that if North Korea is not to change with their full heart and with a sincerity, this kind of gestures and symbolic remarks and meetings is not to create any kind of peace on the Korean Peninsula. As we all understand, Quad, created by the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, they all asked North Korea to stop provocations, including launching of short-range missiles, Tomahawk style or ballistic anyway, and also they emphasized that the confrontational approach raised by Chinese Communist Party, it will be a very dangerous signal in the future for the stability and peace of the Northeast Asia, so that North Korean behavior in the future could be dealt with if they come to North Korean dialogue table. So I think the Quad opinion regarding North Korean question is very important, because there is a opinion of the United States, Washington's, and Chinese Communist Party's objection to this kind of remarks regarding North Korea is creating a kind of very difficult point in the fact that North Korea will not be behaving without Chinese Communist Party's very cooperative remarks that next year's summit will be possible or not, something like that. So I think this kind of inter-Korean approach regarding inter-Korean summit also creating a kind of conditions for dialogue is in some fact understandable, but regarding the past behaviors of North Korea and also Chinese Communist Party's very hostile attitude to South Korea regarding military policies of North Korea and South Korea, something like that. I think this kind of approach, to seek to end the Korean War declaration is not desirable at this moment. Anyway, it is a very important question that the international community in South Korea cannot recognize the existence of North Korean nuclear questions, as IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, is always warning to the international community that North Korea is increasing the numbers of nuclear weapons. Also, they are trying to develop more nuclear materials in Yongbyon facilities. I don't think North Korea is meeting international standard in its sincerity, and they have been deceiving international community. They have kept, by creating agreement with the United States and with IAEA, international community. This is very important. And also, dialogue with South Korea. Always, North Korea is creating an upper hand in the fact that the South Korean government is, in some sense, begging to the North Korean regime to come to the dialogue table, but North Korea has been, rejecting with certain conditions that the hostile policies toward North Korea must be ceased, and United States, South Korean allied military exercises must be stopped. But as we all understand, some part of North Korea's requests have been met by stopping military exercises. Also, as we understand that the United States is trying to have more, dialogues if North Korea is willing to come to dialogue table with more sincerities and with more, I think, the true intentions, really to seek real peace on the Korean Peninsula. Anyway, I think this kind of peace approach could be, in some sense, utilized. If true intentions and if the leftist regime in South Korea is not truly understanding the true intent of North Korean leadership there. So I think we must be very careful, and we must be more, I think, more, in some sense, we must be behaving with more cautiousness, in some sense, in that conspiracies regarding Inter-Korean Summit must not be created, and conspiracies must not be met by real happenings on the Korean Peninsula. So our hope is that in the future, all the inter-Korean meetings and dialogues must be based on realistic approaches of a balance of power theory concept, that peace is not to be created by the world or by a paper agreement, but it must be created on the realistic conditions of a balance of power in terms of military strength. So weapons of mass destructions and nuclear weapons possessed by North Korea is such a dangerous barriers to true inter-Korean relations, and they must show true willingness to reduce or eliminate those kind of weapons, so that true atmosphere for dialogues, either to create more peaceful Korean Peninsula, and also four-party talks or possibly three-party talks regarding the peace problems on the Korean Peninsula will be decided by the North Korea's changes of behaviors, and also their change of tactics into a more good direction, that they have been changing into a trusted dialogue partner. Also their military ally, Chinese Communist Party, must be showing that North Korea's nuclear weapons will not be permitted in the international community, and that all the sanctions and also all the agreement made with North Korea must be kept into the international community. And if North Korea is not behaving according to the code and agreement of the international community, North Korea will be sanctioned more and will be limited in its international activities, so that the true conditions for true dialogue will be created on the Korean Peninsula. So this is my short analysis regarding the recent suggestion of Inter-Korean Summit, surprisingly by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Yo Jong's remarks. I think this is premature if those conditions I mentioned are not to be met with sincerity. And I will also be analyzing with more information and with more latest news in the future, if there are more items that I could talk in the future. Today I will end my analysis.